On today's episode, we have Kate Abbey, an advertising and lifestyle photographer who's been working for over 20 years. We talked to Kate about getting an agent, what's it like living outside of London, and finding inspiration on your doorstep. We also cover personal projects and curation of those. It's an awesome chat, so grab a drink and let's get to it.
Morning, Tom.
Hello, mate. How are you?
I'm not too bad. It is, in fact, afternoon again. Keep doing that.
No, I'm not pulling you up on that anymore. I want to maintain the illusion that we get up extra early and record this every week.
Well, it's because we've just had our guest on. We don't want to peek behind the curtain too much, but we actually record the intros afterwards, so they're actually outros. But
don't give away the game.
Plot twist.
All our surprises.
I know. Oops. But basically, it's afternoon because we've spent so bloody long online already. Yeah. Which is a sign of a good guest.
It is, absolutely.
So,
who is our guest this week?
We are very lucky to be joined by Kate Abbey, who I'm basically going to end up repeating the intro, is a commercial and lifestyle photographer, 20 years experience. What's interesting is that she came onto our radar as a guest at the same time as she was actually suggested by one of our listeners. We are, really want to encourage people out there. I want to say thank you to Claire Pepper for suggesting her. Mm-hmm. And we have some of your other suggestions that we are lining up as we speak. So thank you for that. Like reaching out over Instagram or emailing us, but Instagram's the one we check the most. And if there are subjects that you want us to cover or people that you think would make interesting guests, then it's really helpful for us, because obviously the way that myself and Tom started this podcast was to reach out to our network and, to speak to people that we knew personally to start with, at least. And now we want to, obviously we are expanding that to people throughout the industry, and we kind of rely on the connections of our connections and mm-hmm. people suggesting further people, the whole 7 degrees of separation. We never know.
I thought it was 6 degrees.
Well, I've just added a degree. We might end.
We'll know everyone in the world.
Isn't it? I thought it was 7 degrees of separation until you met Kevin Bacon. Is that the way it works?
Is it? Well, that might be it.
I reckon I could get to Kevin Bacon. In fact, I've been in the same room as Kevin Bacon, so that was easy.
I think. Oh, so easy to get those two mixed up.
Get those guys confused.
For the listeners who are debating whether it's 6 or 7, I'm very sorry to say it is in fact 6.
Oh,
so I'm sorry, Greg. I'm sorry to be that guy.
You just Googled it on.
No, I never Google anything. Ever.
God. Right, anyway. Okay, sorry. 6 degrees of separation. It's got a better ring to it, isn't it?
It does a little, yeah. That's why they've done it.
So, yes, basically, point is, keep hitting us with your questions. We do line them up. There's some questions that we haven't answered, and that's because we've got guests lined up that will cover the subjects that people are asking us to cover. Mm-hmm. We had loads of good feedback from our podcast with LS Digi, mm-hmm. and I think more of the same from future guests, hopefully, like more kind of mix of tech and approach. That's what we're going for. We don't want it to be too techy, but we want to also talk about what kind of makes people tick and their kind of strategies and approaches and people's opinions and all sorts. But if there's anything that you think is missing, then let us know.
That's it. We don't want to make this too techy. I mean, 50% of the hosts are quite tech orientated on this podcast. So, but obviously we don't ever want to get techie for techie's sake. We want it to be useful. There's no point in us going, oh yeah, you want to be talking about flange distance, and people just go, nope, I've lost it. So, whatever we do talk about, we want to make it as useful to you, the wonderful listener, as we can possibly make it. So if there is something that you're kind of thinking, oh, I'd love to know about that, or if there's someone you'd be like, oh, do you know what? That would be an amazing person to hear from. We're starting to reach out to some really, I mean, obviously the people we've had on have been fantastic, but we're starting to reach out to some really quite big names now. So if you would like to hear from people, that you think we should speak to, please do obviously let us know.
Talking about the tech thing, just to give it to our listeners so they can get a sense of the reality of how we do this.
Yep.
I logged on this morning and found Tom squirreling around with his bum in the air, and his head popped up like a little ferret. Gopher coming out of his hole with his head torch on. I was like, what have you been doing, Tom? Cable ties.
Yeah, cable ties. New absolute fascination of mine is, so right, I'll set the scene. Every morning when I come in to record the podcast, I look under my desk, and yeah, my radio voice is here, and I look under my desk and there are cables everywhere. Like, I'm sure you're listening to this at home going, bloody hell, I have cables everywhere as well. We all do. There is probably not a photographer's desk in the world which doesn't have errant cables.
Wait, it's not going to be an advert, is it? It sounds like you're going into, you need...
What you need is zip-tie. No, you don't know. It's so I found these amazing cable clips that you can undo and redo up, and you don't have to snip them, because I'm trying to be better for the environment. So
redo up. Listen, you've heard me talk about Velcro zip ties. What's wrong with them?
You can't attach them to the desk.
True.
So
yours are adhesive, are they?
Adhesive, and then they have like a strap that comes over, and you can lash the strap up as tight as you need it.
They're more kind of cable lashes.
Yeah, cable lashes, if you will. So yeah, you can have either one cable or 10 cables. And so I've now, whenever I walk into the office to do some work, I don't have to worry. I now don't see a single cable.
I don't have to worry. The cables are coming for me.
Oh, I don't know. I they say clean office, clean mind, right?
One day, am I going to log in and you're just going to be there tied to your chair with like your mouth kind of gagged with cables, because the cables are finally won.
I don't film that.
They've risen up.
No, but right? It's nice to have everything organized. Like, especially now, a lot of us have got the time to be able to make our workspaces. Like, I think people always forget the.
Okay, how many times have you redone your desk over the years?
How many times have I redone it?
You have a history of you not only redoing your desk, but actually making them from scratch.
Correct. Yeah, if you type in photographer's desk into Google, I think there's, I'm featured a fair amount, because I've built, you're right, I've built them and it's ridiculous. And now I've got this insane desk with rack mount and all sorts of silly stuff. And now no cables. But I do think it's important, as photographers and creative people, that when we sit down to work, we spend a huge amount of time sat at these desks, in these chairs, staring at these screens. You have to feel comfortable, right? You have to feel like this is the place I am going to be my most productive. I'm going to get so much work done. And that for me is having a completely cable and clutter-free, because I know it's not for everyone. A lot of people do like clutter, but for me, I have nothing on my desk.
I don't think people necessarily like clutter. I feel like people just end up with it. I mean, I'm just staring around at my got a surgical mask, some white magician gloves.
Oh yeah,
compressed air.
Yeah,
a 3-week-old apple.
I mean, I know we're all quiet because of lockdown. But are you really seriously learning to pull a rabbit out of a hat?
I think in desperate times, desperate measures, mate.
Yeah, well, the government did say
rabbit out of the metaphorical hat. Yeah, aren't we always doing that?
But you feel better, right? You feel better when you have a clean workspace.
Oh, 100%. I kind of have days where I come in and get a bit neurotic and then just tidy everything, and then I kind of sit down and I go, ah.
And how much better do you feel?
Great, but it's also pure procrastination, because none of the other two tasks have been ticked off my to-do list.
Well, right. So, and that, I'm glad you brought that up. That is another reason I've done the cable ties, because everything is now fixed in position. For years, it's my fascination with reworking my workspace has made it onto blogs. It's been so over the top, and over the years I've wasted so much time organizing my workspace. Oh, will that make me more productive? Will this make me feel better? Actually, just having a clear workspace that I don't have to touch, and I've fixed everything. I don't have to think about it at all. at all. So now when I come into work, I know I'm coming into work. I know I'm not going to come in and be like, oh, I might rotate the screen or I might recable this, blah, blah, blah. I now know that office means work. There's no procrastination that happens in my office.
Everything is tied down. And
oh, yeah.
You'll get a call and you'll be like, right, grab the camera, and you'll go to grab it and it'll be glued to the table.
I'm going to fall on the floor because I can't pick the bag up. Yeah, pretty much. But
I understand that. I mean, I did do that at the beginning of lockdown. I rerouted all of my cabling and mounted all my plugs on the back of the desk so that all of the got 2 surge protected plugs on either side, and all the cabling goes back there. Because my big bugbear was that when I sat down, it was all kind of bunched under the desk.
Yeah,
and you'd put your feet under the desk, and all you'd hit is multi plugs and cables and my subwoofer and all that stuff.
Yeah, so now I'm stretching my legs out as far as I can. I can just touch the wall. That's it. No cables, nothing. It's glorious. Glorious. I couldn't feel more positive about stuff. And it's mainly because my office is finally finished.
Right. Well, you've heard it from the horse's mouth. Do you think we've bored the listeners enough with cable chat?
I'm sorry. I just feel that I'm a simple man with simple pleasures.
Agreed.
And, come on. Well, I take umbrage to that. No, I feel like there's just things that we do, maybe things that I do, that make me feel better.
Yeah.
And having a clean office.
Sorry.
My neurosis is on another level, yeah. but I'm very pleased.
No, all joking aside, I'm 100% in agreement. I think you need to have your ship in order.
Yeah.
And if you don't have your ship in order, you can't focus the mind. It's
Well, also it's more about, and I don't know how you, the wonderful listener at home, have found this, but I've never really been quiet in my career before, and things have quietened down. So, because obviously we're, there's a pandemic on. And what's been interesting for me is that I've suddenly found a never-ending list of small jobs. And I'm like, I don't need to do that. That's not productive. That's not actually going to get me work, or that's not going to, update the website for me. But I'm like, I'll cable tie everything. So what I'm doing is I've just ticked off all these small jobs, so I cannot procrastinate anymore because there are no small jobs for me to do. And actually, you wouldn't believe, it's a very freeing feeling.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I've got enough small jobs lined up to see me through to the new year. But as in small little jobs on my desk and not actual working paying.
But this is the problem, right? If you just spent a day blitzing those small jobs, get them all out of the way, then you can focus on the bigger thing.
We end up having to do the podcast.
Oh, sure. Blame the podcast. Unbelievable. What you've just done there is you've insulted all of the listeners. If you'd like to complain,
I just want to highlight email Greg. I make.
No, fair enough. So the sacrifice you've made today, we've got Kate Abbey on.
Oh, it was a brilliant chat. I think
it's not that much of a sacrifice to make, is it?
No, it was an honour to chat to her. I think it also covered a lot of interesting stuff to do with finding an agent, what agents are looking for. I mean, Kate's got quite a bit of experience in that matter. How it works when you're not necessarily based in London, and the ability to kind of work, which I think is also incredibly relevant at the moment. And also the other aspect, which I thought was really interesting as us covering, was kind of about her going back to education to actually find a kind of get more analysis in terms of how her work actually is produced and what it means and where it comes from, and kind of rekindling that creative flame and understanding herself a bit more, even if she did that actually relatively late into a successful career. And how I think that's quite inspiring, because really it shows that you're never too late to kind of be learning. You should always be learning, and I think most photographers already realize that you never will know it all, and it's always important to keep pushing and keep being hungry and be a lifelong learner, because that's what we've signed up for. So yeah, loads of good tips in there, I think. Yeah, it's a great chat. Do you want to get into it? Yeah. So without further ado, Kate Abbey, ladies and gentlemen. This week on the show, we are very lucky to be joined by Kate Abbey. Kate's an advertising and lifestyle photographer with over 20 years experience shooting and is coming to us today from the Yorkshire Dales. Welcome, Kate. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. Lovely to meet you both.
Lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too. Now, Kate, you have more experience, both myself and Tom, in terms of years of shooting. You started in the film days, which we kind of just about missed from a commercial point of view. I think we both shot film in our youth, but we weren't shooting kind of film as we started off. So you've been in the industry for a long time. So thank you for coming on, because I think your insights are going to be really, really useful. And just to say off at the top, one of the things we wanted to talk to you today was about the fact that you are repped, and that obviously you've got a lot of experience kind of working with agents over the years. You're currently with Morgan Lockyer, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So, tell us a little bit, just to start, just give us a bit of background, like what's your kind of background with photography?
So, yes, you mentioned I started with film 20 odd years ago. I was based in Leeds. I still pretty much am based in Leeds. I've never been based in London. I do have Morgan Lockyer now. And so over the last kind of 8 years, I've predominantly worked through London. But previous to it was just working up in Leeds. It was one of those small pond, big fish scenarios. So, I trained with a guy, worked there for 16 months as his full-time assistant, and then went to work in Nestle Rowntrees as their corporate photographer, and then did that for about 10 months, and then worked for myself. And I was the only person in Leeds and Manchester shooting people, as in a lifestyle way. There was nobody. So I pretty much, I'd go out with my portfolio to go and see an agency in Manchester, and I'd come back with 4 jobs. It was kind of an unbelievable situation. Wow. It was still hard getting those jobs. They would last for a couple of years, and then you'd have no work again. It was still a hard slog finding it, but I think there wasn't a lot of people doing what I was doing. So it was a good place to start and get yourself set up.
And so you, at what point did you kind of decide that you wanted to start looking for agents in London?
Well, I suppose so. I shared a studio with a guy called Tim Morris. I kind of hired it to start with, and then he kind of went off to London and New York, but kept the studio based because he kept coming back, and so I took on half the rent. Mm-hmm. And Nick Meek was in the studio. He was kind of assisting and just becoming his own photographer. And there was David Harriman. Now, I don't know if you're aware of David Harriman as well. They're 2 absolutely incredible photographers, both of them. And I was just starting out. So, it really does influence you, who you kind of surrounded with at that time. And I was hearing through Tim how they were doing, especially with David was slightly ahead, and he was, I was hearing about what they were earning and what they were shooting, and it was quite something. And Tim was kind of got a great agent in New York, and I kind of just saw what was available, and I kind of realized that the small pond wasn't big enough for me. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to have a bit of that action. So this was before I had kids. I've got a 16 and a 14-year-old. And so I did a very, very fancy brochure, sent it off down to London, spent a lot of time on it. The paper smelt fantastic. It was uncoated stock. It was like double folded and had a really nice colour in between the fold. I've really gone to town with it. The presentation was really important, and got a really great response, and went down. Sue Allett was very interested in me, went down to meet her a couple of times. And she said each time, I really like your work. Have you got more of it? That was the question that kept coming back. There were some really precious fashion people I went to see, and I realized I really didn't want to get into the fashion industry because I was doing a bit of fashion as well at the time. But I just kind of dabbled with it, but I didn't get anywhere. And they were saying, the message was, how much have you got? We want more. So I kind of knocked it on the head, didn't get anywhere, and ended up getting to the family stage, had children. And then it was like, well, that blew that idea out of the water. How can I live in Leeds with a small family and have an agent? So I kind of completely put it on the back burner. And I had a very good friend called Kerry Harrison, who was in Leeds, based in Leeds, who had got a London agent. And I was watching him going up and down to London and thinking, I'd love a bit of that pie. I would adore having an agent. But again, I just thought, well, there's just no opportunity with kids. And he happened to be in my house shooting a feature-length film, which he kind of used our living room to do a few of the scenes in. And the phone rang. So this was after I had kids. They'd gone back to school. I'd worked all the time. I counted my hours. I was doing 85-hour weeks. I got myself badly into debt because they were at school and I hadn't managed to, get the work in and work to the same level. I was ringing up the bank manager, telling him why he should lend me another £10,000. Spending an hour on the phone with him, and knew I had total little faith that I could get somewhere. And the phone rang, and it was Morgan Lockyer. So I hadn't even looked for them. So that was my first experience of getting an agent. I mean, I've had lots of interesting things afterwards, but that was my first one. And it was a Friday afternoon, and Kerry was in the next room, and Charlotte rang me and said, we're wanting a lifestyle photographer. How about it? And I kind of didn't even know I was a lifestyle photographer for a start, but I kind of was like, oh, okay. And it was October. It was this time of year. And I said, well, I was kind of waiting until January. I was doing 85-hour weeks, so I hadn't really seen much of my children. I was going to wait until January and then make a decision about whether I wanted to do it or, what I wanted to do. And Charlotte was like, right, well, we need somebody now. So, and she kind of said, well, I think I've just caught you a bit off balance. It's Friday afternoon. She said, give me a ring on Monday morning. So I was quite nonchalant about it. And I kind of came off the phone, kind of grabbed Kerry and I said, let's look, look, I was aware of them. And I kind of looked at the website and I thought, well, yeah, I kind of would fit in nicely in there. And thought about it over the weekend. And I thought, how can I possibly hesitate about this? This is ridiculous, Kate, Don't be so daft. This is just an amazing opportunity. And if the only thing was stopping me was because of my family restrictions, the fact that I just was torn between, if I go to London, I'm going to have even less time with my kids. So I thought, well, I'll try it for 6 months and see how it goes. There's no harm in there. And I happened to be going down to London the following week anyway. So I arranged to meet them. It was a very quick meet. Charlotte just said, as she was kind of pretty much flicked through my portfolio, said hi, and they said, I've got to go to a meeting, but we want to take you on. I mean, it was quite something. And that was it. And the workload immediately towered because she kind of said, oh, and by the way, you're missing this, this, and this in your portfolio. So can you kind of go out and shoot that? So I already was doing a ridiculous amount of work. And because I was doing the production up here, there's no production companies. So you do everything. So that's why my workload was so high. So my 85 hours increased even more. I was getting between 3 and 5 hours sleep a night. And I can remember looking on Google 6 months afterwards and I was typing in buckled fingernails. I was absolutely torn apart. So I was an absolute mess. I can't, but I mean, within a month I had a job. Somebody had rung me direct, and it was quite a major job that I did the first one within a month. And Charlotte said, well, and I know they came to you direct, but I had actually went to see them last week. So, it seemed to work immediately. I was straight into there. And that was 8 years ago. And my idea was I'd never had an agent before. I didn't know how it worked. I'd heard of friends that were dissatisfied with theirs. So I was thinking, well, maybe there's moving around. And so I just felt I would commit to them for 5 years, regardless. And then after 5 years, I would then go, right, do I want to stay? Do I want to move? How does it work? And so it was just a 5-year plan. And I'm 8 years in and I haven't got to that stage of even wanting to look anywhere else. The relationship with them is brilliant. I mean, I'm under no delusions. It's a business situation. If I don't make them money, they're not going to want me, obviously. But sure. Other than that, they really take care of me. I really get on with them. I like them a lot. I think they work very fairly. To the point that I will come down and stay with them. There's a very, very strong friendship there. So it's a brilliant relationship.
What do you feel like are the kind of key points to maintaining that relationship? Because sometimes photographers can be, I guess, in terms of getting feedback on your portfolio, how much do they have an input on what you need to be getting to refresh it? And how have you got kind of advice to photographers who are working with agents for the first time in terms of that dynamic? Because sometimes you can have one idea of what you want to do and an agent might have another idea.
Yes. So that's interesting. So like I said, they said, we want a lifestyle photographer. And I was like, oh, I didn't even know I was a lifestyle photographer, And so you then become a niche. So, the majority of agents have a black one, a blue one, a yellow one, pink one, green one, spotty one, stripy one, big one, small one. So you become one of those. I think I'm maybe the spotty one, I don't know. But, and so, you become that niche. And so I became the lifestyle photographer, and it kind of creeps up on you. A few years in, I was kind of thinking, I was looking back at my personal work that I was doing before was a lot darker, because I was shooting so much happiness and brightness in my day job, that my personal work was kind of wanted to be a bit more Gregory Crewdson, which is very different to my portfolio.
Wow.
A lot more staged and cinematic and dark. And that's where I wanted to go to. So, but I've totally. So you've got to be honest with yourself. I mean, I do enjoy what I do, and my personal work is becoming. I've done an MA recently, which has been very separate to that. So I guess I am pulling it that way a little bit, and I'm also satisfying myself outside of my commercial work, the stuff that the commercial work doesn't do. But you do end up being in a corridor, and so you have to be. I think you do really have to be happy with that. When I went to see Sue Allott all those years ago, I did at the back of my mind think, stereotypically think, oh, well, I really want an agent. I want to start getting my foot in that door. Maybe if I just started shooting children, I could get into there, because, very stereotypically, that was the feedback that I was getting, that women were shooting. So, I'm glad that I stuck to my guns and kept it.
It's interesting though, because quite often people say to photographers that, people want to see personal work. And in my experience, I find that's quite mixed. I mean, there's so much advice that's given to photographers by people that you can hear one thing from one person and like the total opposite from somebody else. And both of them think that their advice is like gold. And yet it just doesn't match. And some people will say, oh, you must share your personal work. That's what people are interested in seeing. That's people see commercial books all the time. They want to see who you are. And then other people will say, actually, personal work's okay, but they want to be able to see that you can shoot a campaign, and they want to be able to see that you're experienced working with those teams, et cetera, et cetera. What, in your experience, have you found to be the case?
I think it's a bit of both, really. So my personal work over the years has been influenced by my commercial position. So I used to fly out to Mallorca, and it sounds quite extravagant, but I mean, it was £19 on a flight, and you'd stay in an Airbnb, and I would get a local fixer, and we would just wander around, and I would have a specified, we'd have a lot of preparation beforehand, and have specified things that I was wanting to go and shoot, lifestyle, just more reportage of what I was seeing, surfing and skateboarding. But then I would return, and I would arrange models, and I would hire a yacht. Now that sounds really extravagant, but I mean, it was £400 for half a day for a beautiful wooden yacht that, I practically made myself sick because the models were late, and I was thinking, and I hadn't had a lot of sleep, and I was thinking, I need to maximize the most of this. But it was trying to interest the likes of Rolex or whoever. So it was very kind of commercially minded. But that kind of satisfied me at the time. I was quite happy with what I was doing. And I did that for years. And I went out to Mallorca for about 3 times. And that was my personal shoots, were very commercially based. And but that's where I was. So I was building up my business, and it satisfied me. I was pleased. I was really pleased with it. I was really proud of it. I enjoyed it. And I think, but as I've got older, I have needed, my personal projects now are are not like that. And I don't need to do them anymore. I've now got, I think one of the reasons why Morgan Lockyer were interested in me, because I didn't approach them. I think having a surname beginning with the letter A always helps. So you always appear first. So I think they just couldn't be bothered to really get down the list. They just thought, oh, I'll just start with Abbey. So, so I think that worked in my favour. But I think, part of the reason why I think I was attractive to them is I had everything set up. My portfolio, my websites, I'd spent years and years and years studying other people's website, absolutely intrinsically. I looked at all the people that I was interested in that were doing what I wanted to do. And I went through them with an absolute fine comb. I just looked at them religiously. I looked at them in my mind too much, but that's what I did. And I studied them and I got really under the skin of them. And I kind of went, well, what have they got that I haven't? And there was, like I mentioned, Nick Meek and David Harriman, who are very different photographers to my style. But, I could see that their sense of style was so strong and so them. It really had a big influence on me. But they, the other people, Peter Beavis was somebody that round about that time that I looked at a lot. I don't know how prominent he is as much now, but then he was. This was like 15, 16 years ago. He, I think you've got to repeat what you do hundreds of times. And that's what Sue Allett said right at the start. We love what you do, Kate. Have you got any more? So I think my site had, I have 600 or 700 images on my site, which aren't apparent. You've got to kind of go in and, you get to a page and you go in and see more. But they pretty much, every single image says the same thing. It's repeating it again and again. There's no surprises. There's nothing that's slightly different or slightly unusual. And so if somebody's going to book me, they know exactly, there's absolutely no surprise about what they're going to get. Sure. And I've got all the names that says, I've got all the big brands that said that they've got confidence in me. I'm going to deliver. And I've got the style and the lighting in different situations. So I think I had that set up and I had it set up. So again, I studied other people's websites and I worked out what was the best way to show it. So I think you've got to look at it from the viewer's point of view. And I wanted an agent, I wanted to eventually. So that was having them inside. I want them in mind. And I wanted my clients to be able to really understand, to be reassured, to be able to look at it instantly. And so I just kind of learned that the website wasn't there for me to feel satisfied with it. It was completely for them.
That's interesting.
And I had, and my portfolio as well. My portfolio, I'd absolutely gone to town with it. So when Morgan Lockyer rang, I didn't have to fumble something together. Everything was set out, and so I could just say, here you go.
And that's an interesting take on it, isn't it? To have your, sorry, Tom, to have your website kind of directed purely for kind of getting the work versus kind of showcasing your creative, like what you want to do in a totally as if work wasn't an issue kind of way. Do you have other creative outlets that you feel like do satisfy that a bit more in terms of how do you find that balance between kind of doing something that really kind of ticks the boxes for you versus what your client might want?
I think that's always been a really difficult thing for me. I never went to art school. I did a degree in political geography and psychology, and then got into photography. I was a teacher teaching and lived in Thailand for a few years, and got into photography quite late. And so I felt I was kind of hitting the floor running, and to go and play and stand on a street corner and just kind of play, I found really difficult. It made me really anxious because I thought I should be doing something else. And so the personal work always makes me feel anxious because I kind of I never get it to a stage that I'm really overly impressed with. It always kind of gets near. And I think so. After lots of searching, I kind of did an MA a couple of years ago, part-time, which was in creative practice. Photography just was my tool. It was all basically a platform to study something in great depth and to use your tool to get under the skin of it. I was quite embarrassed to do it at first. I was very cagey about it. I didn't let anybody, I obviously discussed it with Morgan Lockyer because I had to go in on a Friday morning for various days a year, and my work would obviously come first. So they were very, if we could manipulate the days around them, we tried to, but if not, my work came first. But sorry, I've lost my train of thought. What was I going to say?
What did you find came out of that, doing that kind of?
Oh, yeah. So sorry, I was a bit embarrassed about it. So because it felt like I didn't know my skill and my expertise if I chose to go back to university. But it was the creative side. The first thing that it taught me to do was to take a bad photo, which I just don't have it in myself to do. I'm so stylistic. It's so going to be pretty. It's so going to be attractive. It's so going to be lit nicely and composed, and everybody's got to be gorgeous and everything. And that to go and so it has more style and substance. And to go and photograph something so that's basically what I did for a year and a half, was to just photograph stuff that it didn't go into my portfolio because it was all about the substance of it. And the thing that I studied, you have to come up with an inquiry and then go with it. And my inquiry was based around confidence in adolescent girls, because I had 2 adolescent girls. And so what I'd always been missing in my work, it was having something that was important, that was underlying underneath it all, rather than going and doing something superficial. So that's what it really taught me. Yeah. And I've I finished it last July, and so lockdown kind of messed up the end project. So I had to kind of ditch it and start again. And so, but I've finished the course, and it was an absolutely incredible experience. But it's now given me, I've now got this project that I can now run with. So, and which will be art-based, which I would exhibit, and it will make, when it gets to that stage, it will feed into my commercial work, and it will pull people into my commercial work, because it'd be so unusual and so different to what I do, but it still has my style in it, and still has it's still through my eyes. So
and people can see, well, obviously, like you said, going back to your large body of work,
yes.
there is not something that's off brand.
Yes.
So I'd imagine, even though the subject matter might be slightly different, or it might be slightly deeper, you're still going to be obviously instantly recognizable as a Kate Abbey shot.
Yes.
If I can go back to your website, so you said that over the course of a year, you studied a load of websites.
Yeah, a couple of years.
What they did well, what they did wrong. What obviously did you kind of take away? Did you see things that everyone was doing, but it didn't work, it was bad? Or did you see things that there were a few people who were doing amazingly well?
I saw, it's very individual, isn't it? What works for a photographer. And so the way they presented it, so there was 2 things. There was what they actually shot, and then the way they presented it. And so because I am a lifestyle photographer, I'm using that in inverted commas, I would, predominantly go and do a shoot where I would have lots of scenarios, and I would be handheld, running around, getting into the scene. And so I would have a story. I would have 10 shots from a particular scenario. And so it suited, the design of my website was such that I would have one shot that showed the scenario, and then you'd get into it and you'd have all the little scenes within that. So that wouldn't necessarily be best for everybody. I mean, it was super, I wanted it to be super, super slick. I think if you are wanting to get an agent, you can't buy an off the shelf website, I think, and you have to be anal, I think, about your kerning on your letters and on your space between your pictures. I think you've got to, the presentation note, it's your opportunity. Portfolio views just don't happen now. So this is their opportunity to see how you present and that they showcase your work. And I think whatever that kerning is and whatever that spacing is, it's so personal, but I think you've got to be that interested to take it to that level. So it really has to look absolutely
100%.
Yeah.
I've just retweaked my website over the past month, and it's been, my poor web guy, it has been a month of me going, do you mind just shifting that to the left by 2 pixels? Oh, let's move that up by 1%. He just at one point started replying with just like facepalm kind of things, because I think I'd ask him to move it 20 and then move it back 15.
Yes.
And
yes.
Bless him, he was very patient.
And I think you have to do that. I think that's really, really imperative that you do. And you have to take it to that level, because I think if you're working, you want an agent and you are working at that level, it has to represent your images. But I think your images in the first place really are the hero. And I think, like I mentioned before, that they just have to repeat and repeat again. There has to be no risk that, oh, right, well, he might give me that, or she might give me that, or they might give me something else. I think it has to be absolutely no question of exactly what it is.
Consistency.
Yeah. So I think if there's a bit of, oh, well, they do, they do a bit of flash, really strong flash, but then they use really soft lighting over here. It's like, well, what am I going to get?
I think we're all probably guilty of that. I think most photographers don't have your focus. I don't think they have maybe the same curating skills. I'll put my hand up. There are shots on my website that are on a pink background, and the majority of my work is shot in workshops and like nasty kind of, well, not nasty, lovely places with wonderful textures. So yeah, no, I'm definitely guilty of that for sure.
Yes. And
I also think it depends what your kind of bread and butter is as well, because sometimes if you're doing fundamentally just commercial work, you're more likely to have a consistency in the body of stuff than, say, editorial, where you might be a lot more at mercy to the situation that you're walking into and having to be far more reactive, rather than commercial work, which is far more premeditated and perhaps, structured and produced and planned. And so if, for example, you do more editorial work, you're more likely to have quite a vast variety of different types of shots, because that's the nature of editorial work, I guess.
But if you were editorial work, would an agent be interested in you, in the sense of, I don't really do editorial work, and is it as financially, I mean, you can make a good living out of it, but can an agent make a living out of it? I don't know if it pays as well. I mean, for a photographer and an agent.
I think in the fashion world, though, a lot of people have to find that balance, don't they? Because the editorial is what gets them the kind of eyes on their work, and then they might shoot a campaign, but their name's never on it.
Yes.
So I guess it's different depending on which aspect and which area and which genre of photography you shoot.
Yes.
For sure.
But there's also the question, is an agent right for you? Is it right to go after an agent? I mean, for me personally, I've loved it. I didn't windsurf. I mean, we're talking about windsurf. I didn't windsurf before I had an agent. There was absolutely no time I could have fit it into my life. So I now have time. I don't know if this applies for all agents, but I think the majority of them in London take 25%. So you are earning money and they take a slice of it. Because I'm based in Leeds, I travel down the night before, so it takes that's 4.5 to 5 hours in the car. And then I shoot, and even if I finish at 10 o'clock at night, I drive home. I know all the lay-bys to sleep in on the way back now. I know all the best spots. But because I want to get back, and I've had to do the school run the next morning anyway, so I have to get back. So but so there's the money side. I mean, I generally get my stay and my mileage paid for me, but I don't get that time back. So I mean, they do put you into a niche. So you end up being kind of confined in that. I haven't had a problem with that. I mean, I have explained it a little bit. I've the benefits of outweighed that. You get to do all the best. You get the access to the better jobs. I wouldn't be shooting for Amazon and Uber and Samsung, and if I was still up here, I just wouldn't have access to that. You get the support from them. So, I mean, I can just go, I never have any money issues with any of my clients through them, because everything goes, that's all bypassed me. I can just have the great relationship. They really do they do kind of buffer a lot of the not very nice stuff, and they will always ask me, how do you want to do this? What do you need? I mean, if there's no time, then Charlotte will just kind of design the costings or whatever and just put them out there, and then we've got to make it fit. But if time allows, it's very much a collaborative thing. So you're not alone. And I spoke to one agent last week, Tim Patton, who's kind of, he used to be the advertising manager for Magnum, and he's he's worked with Morgan Lockyer a bit over this last year before lockdown. And I spoke to him briefly last week, and, he was kind of describing that having an agent is like going to a restaurant. If you got a street full of restaurants, they're more likely to be busy. People are more likely to, customers more likely to go. So if you've got an agent that's got a load of photographers, they're just going to get more footfall. So I think you do actually to kind of get more work. You get, through lockdown, we've had a lot of calls for, have you got any images like, have you got any images of? And so they just send a blanket email out. So I think you do. I think, that there is a lot of benefits. But I know a lot of people that say, well, I run a really sound business and I want to make more money out of production. So they kind of do get it themselves. So
it's not for everyone, but for the people it works with, for the people it works for, it works really well. So I do know there are a lot of people who end up bringing their own in-house person in to kind of deal with all of that, and they deal with the marketing, the agent side, the production side of things like that, and that can be tempting for some people. But I completely see, obviously the pros outweigh the cons for you.
Yes, but there's one thing that I'd kind of like to mention as well is how I got my American agent.
That's an interesting one.
Yes, which was quite interesting. So I'm with Morgan Lockyer. I've been with them for maybe 3 or 4 years, and I'm really liking it. And I'm thinking, actually, I don't want to not have them. And there's nothing to suggest that they won't want me to stay. But, we're all insecure. We've all got insecure egos, haven't we? And I'm kind of thinking, God, what happens if they do kind of not want me for whatever reason? They might just want to fold the company. They might just find somebody better, which can't possibly be the case. But you know what I mean? But,
obviously.
I kind of felt a little bit vulnerable all of a sudden. And I kind of thought, right, actually, I would now like to get a second agent, and I would like to get somebody abroad, because I can't get a second one in the UK, but I can, within the relationship, get somebody abroad. So I thought, right, I'm now going to get a second agent. So I then started looking around and looking at all the different agents in the world. And I came across, for some reason, I pinned down 10 agents all over the world, a couple in America, a couple in Europe, and some in Asia. And I designed this quite unique mailer, which was, I found out the name of the owner, and I produced this mailer. I've got a very, very nice printer here that was very personal to them. And I produced this mailer and I sent it off. And I did it really badly because I didn't really think about when it would arrive. I was really busy and I couldn't follow it up. And so by the time I did, and it was also going to various different countries, and so it was arriving at different times. So by the time I actually got round to ringing them up, a couple of weeks had got by, it lost its impact. I rang a few people. I did a real schoolgirl error and rang somebody up in Hong Kong. And I think it was the agent of the Wade brothers that I decided that I wanted to do. And it was a Chinese name that I didn't recognise. And for some reason, I thought it was a female. And this man answered the phone and it completely put me off my track. And I kind of went, oh, sorry, I think I've got the wrong number. It was a real kind of... So I didn't, so I kind of really flunked the whole lot. And there was somebody who was on holiday and so it was completely... it would completely and utterly messed it up. So I just knocked it on the head. It was a waste of an investment, a waste of my time, and it didn't get to anywhere. And my cousin, who was 10 years younger than me, she moved to New York. And then another light bulb went off. I thought, right, I'm just going to focus on getting a New York agent. This is just going to do this. So this was like a year later. So I then sat down and I spent 2 solid weeks looking at a photography agency directory purely in New York, and it had 250 agents on. And it took me 2 entire weeks of scouring through all of these, so opening up each website and looking to see, did they have a lifestyle photographer? Did they fit in with me? Were they impressive enough? What was the style of their website? Would I slot in? Was I good enough? Did I fit in? What was the feel like? And it took me ages. And I'd look at all the photographers. I would then look at their personal their personal website. So it was a real super effort. And I wrote 3 lists, and I had an A and a B and a C. And the A was the really impressive ones that I would really have to have huge confidence to be in touch with them. And there was a B that I thought, well, maybe I could approach them. And then there was a C that was like, right, well, if I didn't get anywhere, I'll try with a C. And I woke up one morning and I thought, right, I'm now going to decide which one to do. And I'd obviously woken up in the right side of the bed, and I thought, no, I'm going to go for the A's. So, and there was 18. So there was quite a few agencies. There was 18 in the A's. I thought, no, I'm feeling good today. I'm going to go for the A's. And so I designed this one piece of A3 that folded up. And it had the name, it basically folded up, and the first page, you opened it and it said, I want, and you opened it, it said Mark, and you opened it up and it says, I want, and then you opened it up again and it says, to be represented by you. Mm-hmm. And it had one picture and then a list of my clients and my contact details. And so it was very personal. I mean, I'd printed them off on really gorgeous paper. I'd really gone to the effort. I'd, found out all their addresses, and just folding them and putting them in envelopes and putting their address on took the whole of a Sunday. I really, really went to town with it. And then off I went to the post office and posted them like on a Wednesday afternoon. I had no work booked the following week, so I knew I'd be able to get in contact with them. So off I went, posted them. And I came back and I thought it was going to take 5 days to get there. And I just checked when I got back, and my heart just sank and my blood went cold. And it was like, I realised it was £3.70 to send them, and they'd only charged me £2.
Oh no!
So I'm there going, right. So what's going to happen? They're either going to take 3 months to get there on some boat, or they're going to
surface mail.
Yeah, or they're going to arrive in the sorting office, and they're going to get a little note through the door saying, "Can you go down to the sorting office? And can you pay $10 extra fine?"
Like a return call.
Yeah. So I was absolutely devastated, and by this time I'd put a couple of months' effort into it, and I couldn't kind of go and do it again. I couldn't kind of so I don't know if you remember, there was the Russian Winter Olympic Games at Sochi at the same time, and they'd had I don't remember at the start, the Olympic rings were lit up in fire, and one of them hadn't lit.
I remember, yeah.
Yeah, so there was 4 rings and the 5th one. And when the closing ceremony at the end, which we were kind of just so impressed, they acknowledged this human error by having the rings that were lit up at the end. They had one that was just a star to demonstrate, and it was the same one to demonstrate that they'd messed it up. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, I've messed up. So now I have to... and I was up every night until about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning with my other half, who's a designer, kind of coming up with ideas of how we can kind of retrieve this situation. And it was getting closer and closer to the 5 days of them getting this, and how I was going to, so I almost needed to shove in a new marketing campaign to try and retrieve this situation that I put so much effort in. And it was going to arrive on something like Wednesday. And on the Monday, I got an email from one guy saying, "Just received your mailer. Get in touch." And then on a Tuesday, I got another.
You owe me some money.
No, so it managed to get through somehow. And then it transpired that actually there's quite a few. There was a few of them. So I was, in the end, I had 4 to choose from. So I was very fortunate.
Wow.
And yeah, very fortunate. But I suppose my point of the story was you can never put too much effort into it. That is the thing. I mean, I didn't do anything by halves. The quality of what I was trying to put across was really thought out, and it was really personal, and really, there wasn't it wasn't just a mailer that I sent out. It was designed specifically for that particular person. And although I did 18 that were the same, so I got 4 agents out of 18. I thought that was, and I didn't know if the rest had even made it. I don't know, but.
Did you ever follow up with those ones?
No, so I didn't. I think I didn't. No, so I had the one that I wanted.
Mm-hmm. And I guess enough. You don't have to. You probably doing mailers is not something you do that often anymore, being in the position you're in, or is it something that you still is part of your marketing campaign? Because it's quite an interesting time for this, because physical mailers and physical portfolios are kind of out the window at the moment. They're, as Tom would say, they're in the bin. So how has that affected the way that you've changed your marketing?
So yes, what, since lockdown or in general?
Just in general, I think.
No,
I think you've got to be.
I'm asking this question, Tom.
Sorry, Greg. Did you say in general?
No, I said in lockdown.
In lockdown.
Because of lockdown, I think things like physical mailers and envelopes. I mean, for a start, you can send stuff to an office. You have no idea if anyone's actually going to be at the office.
Yes.
That's just one of the myriad of issues at the moment with sending anything physical or expecting to see someone with a physical book. Yes.
So you've got two choices there, haven't you? I mean, I've done bikini lists twice. And I mean, I did it once when at that stage that I mentioned when I was, when Morgan Lockyer first got in touch. And I think I did it once and I sent 2,500 emails out, and out of the back of that, 30 people clicked on it. And out of the back of that, 11 clicked twice. And I then went after that 11, and, I've got maybe out of one of those, it was in Newcastle, I've got so much work out of them, over the years. So it paid its way. So, I mean, I'm all for, because I am so niche, I very much focus on exactly who I want to get. So I have, in the same, I have sent mailers out of the same ilk that I did with my agents in New York, so, but that's maybe suits my style. It is quite niche. And so I'm nichely going after somebody. I mean, you only need, I don't know how many clients you two have. I mean, I don't have many, but
it's not millions.
No,
it's in the high 100,000s for sure.
You're surely bragging there, Tom.
Oh, I'm very honest, me. Very honest. No, do you know what? It's interesting because you're right. You do only really need a handful of good ones.
Yes, I mean, so I mean, I've had quite an unusual time since lockdown, very different to everybody else's experience, and different to my usual experience. I've had nothing from my agent, and that's London's been super quiet. But for some reason in the north, I've had 7 clients that have given me various shoots of various days since the summer, and I don't usually have that. It's just, but I've kept it ticking away, and so I think maybe in a year I would only have maybe 7 or 8 clients that I'd work with. So if you get one new client, that's great. That's all your marketing needs.
So do you, I take it you work from home. It sounds like you live in a pretty idyllic place. Have you kind of got any things over the years that you've realized are important for you to kind of have a good working environment? Are there any kind of things you've put in place to be able to work more comfortably from home, whether or not they be physical or whether or not it be software that you use to try and keep on top of stuff? I mean, we're always interested in those aspects of it as well, because it's, so much of the photography world focuses on taking pictures, and so little of it focuses on what actually makes up 90% of photography careers, which is the business side of things and keeping things ticking along. So say, for example, you said about using bikini lists. How do you maintain those client relationships? Do you keep databases? Do you use particular software? Is there anything that you kind of have found has been helpful along the way?
Yes, I mean, maybe because I'm Yorkshire and I'm tight. When I used bikini list that time, but
that could be your strap line. I'm Yorkshire.
I know, I'm Yorkshire and I'm tight. I just make do. That's the Yorkshire farmer's daughter in me. We just make do with what we have. That, when I was ringing up the bank manager to say, can you give me another 10 grand? I could afford bikini list because it was only, you could pay on a monthly basis. So it was 50 quid. If you had to pay for a year, I wouldn't have got it. But I did it then. And then after that, even then, maybe, Morgan Lockyer was starting to come on. I was still, and I'd got myself out of debt. I still wasn't prepared to pay another 500 quid for bikini list. So I then got onto LinkedIn and religiously got people's details off that and created my own database. So, my LinkedIn was quite healthy early on when other people's wasn't. And I'm not very good at doing social media. I'm not very good at doing it on a regular basis. I kind of just forget. But I use Insightly, but it's very, I'm quite an organized person and I don't like doing it. And so it kind of, what happens, and I don't know about you two, but I seem to have 2 yearly cycles when, I am very established. I'm good at what I do. I'm, an expert in my field and I've got 20 years experience. I'm good. But I still have periods of time. 2 years ago when Brexit came along, I had very little work and everybody else was busy. And I'm now busy this year when everybody else has been quiet. So it swings and roundabouts. But, so I do things like Insightly, which is a database and LinkedIn.
It's a CRM, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So if I get new clients, I will try and get in with LinkedIn with them, get them onto my database and then find out their handles on Instagram. And so that's the 3 things that I do. But, I kind of, it's very hit and miss. And when I'm quiet, I then look to it and think, right, I need to put some energy in here. But then when I'm busy, I don't. And that's not good practice, I don't think. I think you should be.
No, but I think it's quite natural. I think it's quite natural because most people probably get a little, you can't be on all the time because you burn out. So I think a lot of people probably have these, when you're busy, you do end up neglecting some of that side of things. And it's sometimes it's not until it's a bit too late and suddenly the phone stopped ringing that you go, oh crap, I haven't done any proper marketing in the past however many months. Yes. And now I need to look into that. And obviously in an ideal world, it would be more balanced rather than those kind of peaks and troughs. But, it's a lot for one person to be doing, when you're trying to run a business like that. So
it is. When you think about it, it's absolutely incredible when you think about the skills that we have to do to be a photographer, to be a commercial professional photographer. It's mind-boggling. It's absolutely mind-boggling. Regardless of the shoot and managing, I as a child, I was ridiculously shy, really, really shy. I couldn't bear any attention, and so to be stood on a platform with, I've been on, as you guys will have been, huge shoots with 120 people on set, and it's all based around me. And I'm stood there and I think, how did I get here? This shy youngster that I used to be. And all of a sudden, and then I've got, some clients that are demanding my attention whilst the lights have just broken, whilst the rain cloud's turning up, and so you've got all that to navigate on the shoot, as well as creating some epic imagery. But then you've got to be able to market yourself. You've got to be able to run a business. You've got to, it's absolutely incredible what we have to do. And if you're good at it all and you get somewhere, but if you kind of lack in some ways, then you see some incredible photographers that aren't getting anywhere because they just can't market themselves.
Yeah. I think that's a big area of, there's a definite skill set to being able to successfully market yourself, but it's something that needs to be developed by anyone that's going to turn it into a career.
Because it's not it doesn't just come down to marketing, does it? It comes down to authenticity. Which in turn goes back to what you were saying about, for example, your website, your portfolio, that is completely consistent throughout. And your marketing, I assume, has the same look, feel, messaging that's throughout. As far as a brand goes, Kate Abbey is a really solid brand with a full aesthetic that runs from start to finish.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of people go, oh, I've got to do some marketing. I'll make a mailer and I'll do a new font and I'll make it really big. And and people don't kind of think, is this my genuine voice? Is this my brand's voice? Is this in keeping with every other aspect? And I think that's where a lot of people fall down. And speaking from my point of view, I have been guilty of that in the past, less so now because I have a better idea of where everything is. But like in the past, I have kind of just gone, I'll stick a new logo in here. I'll do this. I'll pink font. Why not? And stuff like that. So it's interesting that obviously the messaging has to be authentic as well.
The one thing as well I wanted just to touch on, and to not jump back too far, but when you said about doing your masters and you went back to to kind of follow up as a creative practice to look into your work, and you said you kind of discovered this thread that was going through your work that you weren't aware was there before. And I think, that's so interesting, because that's what's so fascinating about photography, is that we can produce work for years and years and not realize that actually there's some kind of subconscious thread that carries on throughout that we might not be aware of. At what point when you were doing that did you find that out? How did you find that out? Was that through introspection, looking at your work, or was it through conversation with other photographers or with tutors? Like, how did you kind of get to that point?
So I think my creativity I've always struggled with. I think, like, I can't stress how much I've learnt to become a successful photographer by studying other people. And so I've basically copied them.
Which is where a lot of creativity comes from. I mean, it's copying and adapting.
So I've obviously had a style. I mean, I've looked back at things that I shot on film 20 years ago now, and I go, wow, that I quite like that. So I have a skill underneath it all that says that's a nice, that's an attractive style. I wouldn't be where I am otherwise. But I've lost my train of thought again. But yes, so it's always been a commercial. Sorry, you're going to have to ask that question again.
No, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, like, at what point how did you come to the conclusions that you came to on that course in terms of discovering that about yourself? Because as I was saying, it was always there. It's just that you hadn't realized that was a thread that was holding your work together. And I'm interested in, as photographers, how one kind of gets to those conclusions, because we're quite solitary creatures, and especially now during the pandemic, and the days are gone when you used to go to a lab and kind of have that social aspect with other photographers. And from my personal experience, quite often the threads in my work only come from other people spotting them. And when they then explain them to me, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That makes total sense. But I would find it personally quite difficult to spot that myself unless I really knuckled down and got really introspective, which probably isn't within my nature that much. So I'm asking, I guess, how did you find that about your work? Was that through conversations? Was that with conversations with other photographers, with peers, with people on the course who were tutors, or was it through introspection?
So I didn't feel I had any threads, and I felt that I was reproducing what I felt that the industry wanted me to reproduce. And I felt that I was really dissatisfied with my personal creativity. I knew it was there. I mean, it was in my work, absolutely, undoubtedly. And I loved doing what I did. And I don't regret, the direction I've taken, I wouldn't change it. But there was something that wasn't being satisfied. And I just feel that, so I didn't feel those threads were apparent necessarily, because I wasn't doing them. And it's always been a struggle for me to be satisfied with my creativity, because this sensible head is too strong in me to be functional and to be professional and to be money earning and to provide.
Do you think there's also an aspect of maybe coming from, I don't know about your personal background, but in the sense of sometimes if you have that side, your left and your right brain, I can't remember which side's the creative side, I think it's the left side. So if your right brain's quite kind of, this is something we talked about last week on the show actually with Art Stryber, left and right brain and the balance between the two. And if you come from a background, say with your parents that were very kind of, you need to be sensible, you need to do this, you need to do that, sometimes the idea of creativity and being an artist can seem a bit kind of like airy-fairy and a bit like, well, you haven't got time for that. And obviously being a photographer, you need to have both. You need to allow your left side, if it is the left side, to be creative, to be the side that embraces that. And you also need the sensible kind of pragmatic, organized approach.
So, yes.
Does that ring true to you?
Yes, totally rings true. So I think whichever is the commercial side is very strong in me, hence why I am in the position that I am in. and it's too overpowering. And so I've struggled with the side that is creative. And, I toyed with doing an MA 10 years ago because I wanted to be forced into that. I wanted that side of me to be helped. And all my personal work was, the portfolio, it was too strong in the back of my mind. Yeah. Well, can I get work out of the back of this rather than just shooting for myself? So the MA, which I can't express how incredible it was, and I can't encourage people enough to do any learning. And you're not learning how to take a photograph. It's just learning how, as in physical, it's learning how to take a photograph mentally. And the course was absolutely incredible. It just strips back. You are guided through this pathway, through this journey on this platform, and before you know it, you're finished. And it's really forced you to get into the nitty gritty. I mean, to the point that I was looking at femininity and studying feminism because I was looking at girls and the confidence, and to the point that I actually was, studying myself and looking at how I was projected in society and everything. Getting into deep parts and how the women are seen and how they are represented. But going into some quite interesting corners in that I'm actually not going to. I'm not going to go into.
That makes sense if you going on what you just said about kind of you being a shy kind of younger person, like a teenager and what have you. Then that makes total sense that would be an area that would be coming through in your work. And it takes sometimes, as you said, it took an MA to kind of allow you the space to be introspective enough, and almost for you to allow yourself to say, you know what, this is a legitimate use of time. Because I know personally that's something I battle with sometimes, is that allowing yourself the time to explore creative outlets and to explore stuff creatively, because the other side of your brain is saying, no, you've got that to be doing, and you've got that database to update, and you've got this invoice to send, and you've got all of this admin to do, when actually you have to be able to find balance, because I mean, that's life, isn't it? Life is about finding balance.
And I think it was definitely, the MA was definitely part of the journey. And what really nailed it at the end was lockdown. And so lockdown happened, and the first 5 weeks were for me, were a positive experience because I wasn't in touch with anybody who was suffering from it. And also I was at home with my daughters and my other half, and my eldest was going to do her GCSEs and they got cancelled. So I now had my daughter back. And the weather was glorious. And so it was fantastic. And then after 5 weeks, I then panicked and thought, right, well, all my jobs have been cancelled. Where's our income going to come from? And I started shooting a project based around the girls, which I kept meaning to do more in depth for years and years, but I was only touching on the surface of it. And so I would kind of demand their attention, put them into a room, said, no, you've got to sit there. Because, mum's got to earn the money. You're not going to be able to eat anything unless mum earns the money. So you just sit there and be quiet and do what I tell you to do. And they would do it with a face on them. And I was getting, and everybody had to stop because mum was shooting, and got all the lights out and would treat it like a shoot. And I was getting more and more wound up and cross about it because it just wasn't happening. And I happened to be in the kitchen, and one of them was making some bread or something, and it was all horrible kind of tension. And I kind of spun round, and the other one was just on her phone next to the Arga, and with no lights on her, not even looking at me. And I just kind of took that shot, and that was it. And I thought, I don't need my light. It was almost like a light bulb moment. It was a real kind of ding, and it was like. And so from that day on, I changed something. And it was like, because I'd become so institutionalized, and my agent, having an agent, not Morgan Lockyer per se, but an agent, institutionalizes you. Being in the commercial photography institutionalizes you. And before you know it, you've got so many things that come into your head before you take a photo, that lockdown and my MA leading up to it, and the desire to do it, and lockdown all came together. And it was the last final gate that went, right, this is I'm just feeling it. I'm not looking at it. I don't need to move that cup that's bright orange on the side. I could just move my camera, oh yeah, I can't see the cup now. And so what happened that after that, every time I walked into a room, even though, and I worked out that we've lived here for 15 years, and I'd worked out afterwards that I'd walked into that room 10,000 times. But now I was walking into that room and I was like, don't speak, I've got to take a photo. I've got to take that photograph of that light. I never noticed it before. I'd never seen it. It hadn't come into my head, but it was like I had to sleep with the camera next to my bed. I couldn't get out of bed until I'd taken some photographs from where I was laying, and
wow.
And because I did, and that feeling has gone to a certain extent, but I now know how to harness it back in.
That's amazing.
And I've now just embarked on, I'm now doing an artist in residence at Bradford Cathedral, which is something that I kind of fell upon and didn't really, my initial reaction was, I don't want to do that. I'm not religious. I was taking a photograph of a friend who's the head verger, and he has his black, I think it's called a cassock, I don't know what it's called, those black dresses, his tunic, and he just looks, and these big black glasses, he's really arty, and he just looks in kind of gingery short hair, and he's just really graphical, and in this beautiful white stone hard building with this soft black material. And I just was photographing him and thought, this is a just beautiful shot, and the light was shining through. And they kind of approached me and said, well, we'd like you to come and be the artist in residence. And I thought, well, what does that mean? And basically, I'm given carte blanche to go and photograph whatever I want to do for 12 months. And I'm not religious, and it's a different part of society that I don't necessarily come across. But I happened to speak to Tim Patton, who I mentioned earlier, and he says that's what happens at Magnum. And he said it's not, you don't just go up with your bag and just kind of, okay, I've kind of got an idea, I'm going to shoot. There people will go for weeks and weeks and weeks before they even get the camera out. So I had a lot of work. I started this last month, and I just had back-to-back work, and in the sense of, because the work's up here, I'm doing the production. So I'm on a shoot. I get an email, and I'm getting emails coming through. Can you sign this model release before 3 p.m? And it's like 2:30, and I'm shooting, and I'm there kind of on my laptop trying to fill in these model releases whilst the client's not looking over my shoulder. And, so I'm just super stressful. And, but I'm shooting the next day for the next client. So it was full on. So it stopped. I then said to Bradford Cathedral, right, I can start now. And I just arrived there, and I just walked in and sat on this chair, there's only about 5 chairs in there because it's now socially distanced. And and the organ was playing, there was this incredible music, and they were doing the service on Zoom, so they were projecting this projection onto the side of the cathedral, which just blew my mind. And they were just setting it up, and it just looked incredible. And I was just like, I don't even need to move from this chair. I can just photograph those indentations of somebody's stiletto heels on the floor. And, there was so much human in it. And so that's, to do projects like that aren't related to your commercial work, I think is really important. That's where you grow, but you're seeing yourself in it, really, aren't you? It's just a reflection of you. It's just mirroring you and how you look at the world and where you fit into it all. It's just learning.
Yeah.
It's a process of rediscovery, isn't it? Because it obviously brings you back to what first got you into photography. And, like those, I think a lot of photography and creative photography is about learning to see again in the way that we saw when we were younger. Like looking at the world with a child's like eyes, because the more experience we get, the more kind of you get blind to the things around you, which I think is what you basically were saying. Yeah. But I think we're probably at a stage now where we need to start wrapping things up. So before we go, we always have 2 questions that we'd like to ask you, and I'm sorry that we're throwing you onto this desert island. It's it's been
we're cruel.
A really fun chat,
what can we say? We're cruel.
But now, after all of this, we're going to cast you off onto this desert island, and you have 1 camera and 1 photo book to take with you. So, can you reveal what you are going to be taking with you, Kate? Right.
So my camera. So when you mentioned that I could take one camera, I immediately was horrified because I'm an absolute but I think Tom would be totally horrified with this in the sense of I'm not a camera geek at all, in the sense
I'm horrified. I'm horrified.
In the sense of, and that I think, I kind of make do with what I do. So I spoke to Tom recently because we had
a lovely chat.
He is so knowledgeable. And I was like, Tom, where do I start? Because, I shoot on a Pentax 645Z and have done since it first came out. It's been a roller coaster with it because it first came out and it didn't really work properly with all the software and loads of limitations. It takes ages for a camera to start fitting in properly, and had to learn Lightroom, which I was really upset about. But it's not 100% amazing, but I'm kind of stuck with it. I haven't found something yet that I'm want to jump ship with. So I kind of make do with my stuff, which isn't very, very innovative. But so I think none of my cameras, I've tried Leicas, I've tried different types of cameras. They've never really.
What was your first camera? Like as in when you first got into photography? It
would be a Canon, but I can't remember what it was. It was a Canon SLR film. So
when you were shooting film and you were shooting predominantly 35mm film.
So when I started working for myself, I bought Hasselblads. So those were what I kind of were, and that's what I shot with. So I did have a Canon to kind of have in my bag, but it was Hasselblads, and I sold them a couple of years ago, and I think that would be that Hasselblad would be film. Would be what I would take, because film, I hardly ever shoot. Yes, and I hardly shoot film now, but that would be my love, I think, because I would enjoy getting back into that.
Mm-hmm. With an 80.
Excellent.
With a what? Sorry.
With an 80mm lens.
Yes. Oh no, it was a 60. 60 was my favourite. Yeah, it really, in the portraits, it just made people bend a bit more.
Yeah,
bend around the lens.
Very nice. And so obviously now you're still on the desert island. What would be your photo book?
Well, I have two. So I have quite a lot of photo books, and I thought, I can nail that. So I'll just go and have, this is my favourite book. And I looked at it, and then I thought, I'll just look at it. Oh no, that's my favourite book. And then I just kind of, but there's two, and I don't know if I'm allowed to, and because they're quite different. One is Mountains and Waters by Alexander Gronsky. Mm-hmm. And the book itself is just lovely because it's been, when you actually cut a book in post, so the hard cardboard cover is in line with the pages.
Yep.
Does that make so? It feels the edge just feels lovely to run your thumb down. And he's a little bit Andreas Gursky, a little bit Nadav Kanda, who did the Yangtze River. It's a bit like that. He's in that area, and it's plates. Imagery of just beautiful landscapes with people in, so it's human elements, so it's just absolutely gorgeous, and I really, really love that. And my other book is called Girl Pictures, which is by Justin Kurland, which came out this year, which was what I did my MA on. And she studied under Gregory Crewdson and I think Philip Lorca da Corsa as well. And so she has essence of that. And she created Girl Pictures is based around it. And it was shot 20 years ago, and it's just been published because of Me Too. It's so relevant now, and she's recreated on plate film these utopian worlds where girls ruled, and it was in the outback of America, where it was seen as a John Wayne, Huckleberry Finn environment, and girls weren't allowed to exist in it. So she reproduced these very strong teenage girls that are in this environment. So it's just to say, this happened, and they were beautiful and just really interesting. So, so I don't know if I'm allowed to. Are you going to give me two?
We'll allow it.
Thank you.
We'll allow it.
Excellent.
Brilliant. Well, listen, Oh, sorry, Greg.
Go on, Tom. Do the.
No, you go.
No, you go. No, you go.
All right. Kate, where can people find you?
So they can find me on website kateabbey.com. They can find me on my Instagram, kateabbey_. Or they can come up and see me in the Yorkshire Dales. Which,
there we go. Open invite. Yeah. But actually, let's be careful there.
Yes.
Let's be careful. But yeah, no, it does sound delightful. So you're going to get out on the you're going to go surfing anytime soon?
Well, hopefully this week.
So jealous, so jealous. For those who might, well, I don't even know if we covered that earlier. But you're a very keen windsurfer.
Yes,
I'm very
keen.
jealous.
So yes, it's great fun. Keeps your brain in sort. But also, I mean, because of lockdown, it's a bit more limited. While swimming has been a bit of a fill-in for it.
Yeah, must be brave. It's going to be chilly in Yorkshire.
Yes,
it's going to be nippy.
It is.
I've got to ask. It's off the photography topic, and I should really wait till afterwards, but I'm going to ask it now. I used to ride an 11-foot surfboard. I'm a big bloke, and I had this thing custom made. It was ridiculous, and it was effectively like a large sail. Now, how do you get your windsurf stuff down to? Because obviously you need wind. With me, I had this 11-foot board that I got blown 30 foot down the beach trying to walk to the water.
Down with it.
Yeah, and I got spun around, chucked all over. It whacked me in the face, and then I was so knackered by the time I got to the water.
Tom, I'm going to answer this. You hold the sail at a certain angle so that the wind glances off it. Surely,
right? That does make sense. Actually, do you know what's interesting? That's what everyone else was doing. So is that right?
Yes.
You let it go with the wind. It's like with a ship with a sailing boat.
Yes.
You never hold the sail tight when you're in with the wind, otherwise the boat will get capsized.
Yes,
right.
But it is like torture because you have just been out for like 2 hours and then you've got to do the walk back and your arms are getting longer and longer and it's just like, kicking the teeth really, that you kind of go,
you've got to have strong arms to do that bit. Yeah. And fingers, cold, bloody fingers. I hope you got a good set of gloves.
Yes.
I mean, on a desert island, you'll be able to windsurf to your heart's content.
Yes, that'd be amazing.
Well, you've got to get to the desert island. You will have had to windsurf there in general.
Yes, exactly.
And there we go.
There we go. No, we've put up a wall. We've actually put up a wall about 30 foot out, so no one can get out when they're on the desert island. You're on very good. Yeah, sorry. You're a very good company though, so don't worry.
Yes.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of photographers out there now.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Kate. We will put all the links in our show notes. Very quickly, the story that you were talking about, the project that you were talking about, that you shot throughout the virus, that's on your website, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's called Virus. Yes.
Called Virus. I love it. I love the way you've used text and graphics involved in the pictures as well. It looks really good.
Yeah, Virus. Very good. Very clever.
So we will put a link to that in the show notes. And thank you so much for your time today. Well,
thank you both. It's been totally enjoyable. And as I said before we started, I think it's brilliant what you've done here. And a great service to everybody. There's a lot of people that will really gain from all the expertise that you're bringing in and that you're encouraging people to share. So you're really doing an important part. So thank you from all of us.
Oh,
well, it wouldn't work if we didn't have guests like yourself. So back at you.
Thank you.
And just to confirm, the check for saying that is in the post.
Cut, Tom, cut.
Sorry. Right. Thanks, Kevin.
You're welcome. That'll helpful during lockdown. Thanks.
Brilliant. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you both.
Thank you very much for listening to the latest episode. If you'd like to find out more or to see the show notes, please go over to exposenegative.com, or you can follow us on Instagram at xnegative. It's very imaginative. And if you want to email us, you can email us at info@exposenegative.com. I know, how did we come up with that? So I hope you enjoy the podcast. Any suggestions, feedback, or general harassment, please send it in. And we'll catch you on the next one.